welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Krista. I'm an international mom of two, a dental hygienist turned midwifery student. And here on my channel, I talk about all things motherhood, midwifery, pregnancy, and childbirth education. So if these are things of interest to you, please follow along and get ready to birth and bloom. Hey friends, welcome back. I'm so happy you're here. So today I plan on talking to you all about my second birth story of my daughter June. If you watched last week's video, I told my story of my first birth, how I had a medical induction in the hospital at 37 weeks and 4 days, and how overall I did have a really positive, empowering birth story. But you may be wondering, okay, she had a great hospital birth. Why would she choose an out-of-hospital birth for her next birth? Well, I'll tell you a little bit why and my thought processing, my personal story, and I hope this resonates to you. I know a lot of moms will have a hospital birth their first experience, and then for whatever reason, good or bad, they decide to have a home birth or a community birth with their second, third, fourth baby. So this story may resonate to you if you've had one baby already, you had your baby in the hospital, and maybe left that experience wanting to maybe change a couple things, or left with birth trauma or whatever have you. But I hope this perspective of my two different birth stories can be helpful to you in some way. Okay, so a little bit of history, if you didn't watch my first video. My first daughter was born in 2020 in December at the hospital. And after the birth of my first baby, I was one of those moms that was like somehow baby crazed 6 months postpartum. And my first daughter was the light of my life. I loved her so much. Her name is Lona, which actually means light. It's a very fitting name. Anywho, I was one of those moms that wanted another baby soon. I knew that it was important to give my body time to recover. I was still breastfeeding. My body had gone through a lot. And though I wanted another baby fast, I knew also I needed to be mindful and give my body and everyone time, because I wanted to enjoy at least that first year with my firstborn baby before thinking about expanding our family. So the following year in December, we had decided that it would be time to start trying again for our second baby. And I've also talked to you about this in another video where I go through my miscarriage experience. So this is your trigger warning. But my second pregnancy, I got pregnant in December, and I found out in March that I had lost the baby. She was about 12 and a half weeks gestation, and I ended up experiencing a miscarriage on my own at home. That is what I chose for myself. I did not want to have a medically managed miscarriage if I didn't have to. I was in communication with a good doctor here in Ghana if I needed some medical intervention, but I did want to allow my body the time that it needed to recognize that this was not a viable pregnancy, and for me to pass the baby on my own at home. And that is kind of the foundation of why I chose what I did for my third pregnancy. So though my second pregnancy ended in a loss, and it was a really incredibly painful and hard experience, I wouldn't change it. It was what I needed for myself. It brought me closer to God and the plan, and I realized that after that birth, or after that miscarriage, which is a birth in its own right, more so what I wanted for a future pregnancy. So this story is a little wild because I lost that baby in the beginning of March, and I got pregnant that same month at the end of March, which is really wild. But you do hear stories of that happening where basically as soon as after you've lost a pregnancy, your body is going to return back to its normal cycle and you are going to ovulate again. And for me, I ovulated just a couple weeks after that loss, and that is when I conceived and got pregnant with my baby June, my second daughter. So when I learned I was pregnant with her, it was early April. I was shocked, but also not shocked. I felt like this baby was for me. I knew that if if this pregnancy was not viable. It just didn't make sense to me that if this pregnancy happened so quickly after a loss, I knew that she was for us. So when I found out I was pregnant with June, I knew exactly what I wanted for my birth. I had a confidence in my body that I wouldn't have had it not been for that miscarriage experience. And I know that may sound a little confusing to people, but the fact that I just had a lot of faith in my body after that loss, because I was proud of my body for recognizing that this was not a viable pregnancy, that we needed to pass the baby, and it actually gave me the confidence I needed to then move into my next pregnancy and plan an unmedicated out of hospital birth. So I was living here in Ghana, which we still are, and I had essentially found a doctor here that was doing my prenatal appointments and checkups and whatnot. And I knew that there was a birth center in Pittsburgh called the Midwives Center. That's where I was planning to give birth. And what we had done for my first baby during the pandemic, we were back in the States to have the baby. And then this time, since we were in Ghana, we were going to go back towards the end of my pregnancy, have time there, and then wait for the birth of her. So I was working with a doctor here. He was lovely. I had congruent care with the midwives at the Midwife Center. And I had built rapport with them prior because I had contacted them while I was pregnant with the second pregnancy. And I felt really, really good about my decision in having an out-of-hospital birth. At this point in my journey, I felt a really strong calling to become a midwife. And I kind of had the confidence that I needed after my first birth and then the second experience I had to have that fully unmedicated birth. I knew I wanted to become a midwife at this point, and I've said in previous videos that I felt like for me to walk this journey into midwifery, I really wanted to experience a normal physiologic birth where we did as minimal interventions as possible so I could truly experience what that was like. And everything inside of me felt prepared and ready to have that process. And mind you, my mom is incredible. She's had 4 unmedicated births. So I knew she could do it, I could do it. So that was my mindset going into this birth, is that I knew I could do it. Women around the world since the beginning of time have been giving birth naturally. And birth is designed to work. There are cases, of course, that if someone is high risk or if their baby is high risk, that a natural unmedicated birth may not be the best option for you. But in most cases, low risk pregnancies and birth do so well with unmedicated natural physiologic births, okay? So if you talk to any midwife, they will tell you the less we do, AKA the practitioner, the less that is done, birth tends to unfold the smoothest, meaning the less intervening, less medicines, less poking, less prodding, less monitoring, all of the things. And one thing I wanted to say that I didn't mention last time was that for me, one of the hardest parts about being in the hospital was like feeling like a robo woman. First of all, I was a bit of a pincushion. They take lots of samples of blood. They do your IV. If you decide to get an epidural, you're gonna have anesthesia then. You're attached to a pulse oximeter where you have a cord attached to your finger. You have a blood pressure cuff on. You have an IV. You have 2 belts around your belly to measure your contractions and the fetal heart tone. So literally, if you're having a hospital birth, you have to be prepared to be attached to many, many things. And for me, the most annoying element was the little pulse ox on my fingertip and the blood pressure cuff. And because I was being induced because of gestational hypertension, I understand the importance of having that blood pressure cuff on. But I knew going into this next pregnancy and birth that I wanted to make a 180. If you decide to have an out-of-hospital birth with midwives, whether that's in a birth center like me or in the home setting, they're very similar. You will most likely not have an IV. You will not have the belts around your belly. They'll do intermittent monitoring with a Doppler to check on baby, make sure baby's doing really well through the labor process. And you're not going to be attached to machines that are beeping or interrupting the flow of your labor. That is what I wanted. I wanted to have a peaceful labor. I wanted to have just the space that I needed to go into labor land and let labor unfold naturally to have as smooth of a birth process as possible. So that's what happened. So I'm going to jump into the end of my pregnancy. We were in Pittsburgh and I was waiting for spontaneous labor to begin. Because of my first birth experience and being induced so early, I never had the opportunity to wait for labor to begin on its own. And I will say, waiting for spontaneous labor is a mind game. It is really hard. This is not to discredit anyone that has had to have an induction or has chosen a different alternative to their birth experience. But if you are pregnant now and you are waiting for spontaneous labor, know that you are not alone in the feeling of like, this is hard to wait. Every Braxton Hicks or like false labor episode, you're gonna be like, when is my baby coming? The end of pregnancy can be really, really challenging. And for myself personally, with my third pregnancy, my daughter June, the last couple of weeks, really starting at like 37, 38 weeks, I was having multiple episodes at night where I was waking up around the same time with contractions. And a few nights I remember like it was probably about 4 hours of pretty intense contractions, but they were really erratic. And I remember thinking at like 4 a.m., like, should I message my doulas? Like thinking that this could be it. And that was around 38 weeks pregnant. It wasn't it. It was not it. But when it came time for me that I was actually in true labor, I was starting to wake up with some contractions in the night, which is really, really common. And I remember kind of tossing and turning and trying to sleep through them, which is what you should do. You should try to get as much rest in early labor as possible. So I was kind of tossing and turning, trying to sleep through them. And I was 39 weeks and 4 days at this point. And I remember around 4 a.m., I officially had woken up and realized that like, these are pretty intense. I'm going to get in the shower. I'm going to see if they subside, because I had chatted with my midwife just a few days prior. And she said, if you have one of these episodes again, drink a lot of water, take a warm shower. If they don't peter out, it's probably time, call us and let us know. So that's really what happened. And it worked out that the midwife, the practice that I went to has multiple midwives. And the midwife that ended up being on call for my birth was the midwife that I had my 39-week appointment with. So this was really comforting in me that I had just chatted with her a couple days ago. And then to find out that she was the midwife on call just gave me peace, knowing that it was a familiar face. And we had talked about this plan. So I got up to be in the shower. And at this point, my contractions were pretty intense, but they were not at a consistent pattern yet. And they will tell you that if this is real labor, you're likely going to have multiple bowel movements. You may have something called a bloody show, where when you're having multiple bowel movements, this is a good sign. Normal labor is going to empty you out, okay? Just is what it is. You're going to use the bathroom quite often. And you will likely notice something called the bloody show. This is showing us that the uterus is starting to open and starting to dilate. And our mucus plug, which we've talked about in the past, is going to release. You may not notice your mucus plug at all, but you may also notice a little bit of like red or pink tinge smear when you're wiping. And that's what happened for me. So I think I was going in between the shower and using the toilet. And I was just kind of working through contractions in the shower. The hot water felt really nice. I had texted my doulas at that point to let them know what was going on, that like I thought this was really the real deal. And I had hired a doula team, so they were going to be deciding which doula was going to come to my birth. And so I was in the shower probably for about 30 minutes or so. And during this time, my husband was still sleeping, because I knew if this was it, I wanted him to be well rested, or as well rested as possible. And I realized that they were not petering out. They were here to stay. And I think after my shower, I got back into bed to try to rest more, because in early labor, you should get as much rest as possible, whether you're tired or not, because labor can be a marathon. It can be really long. Thankful in my case, it was not long, but I didn't know that. So it got to a point, I think maybe around 5:35 or so in the morning, I woke up my husband. I said, hey, I'm having contractions. I think this is the real deal. I want to see how it goes, but I'm probably going to let the midwife center know soon that I'm in labor. So I think I had waited for a couple more contractions to come and go, and they were pretty intense, and they were strange, because some of my contractions would last a long time, not like the typical like 1 minute. They would like contract my uterus, I'd be really crampy, and I would feel them for minutes. And I was worried that like, oh no, what if my labor is like this, or they're not like normal contraction sensations. But I will say they regulated themselves out later in labor. So at that point, I had called the midwife center. They connected me with Jessie, my midwife that was on call. I let her know what was going on, and they knew my history with my first daughter, Lona, that I had a fast labor. So to be safe, she said, okay, great. I think it's time you come in. Let's meet at the midwife center at 8, and we'll go from there. So this was 7 a.m. And it was like the most perfect timing possible. My older daughter was still sleeping. Because we live out of the country, we were staying at my parents' home, and my mom was like essentially on duty for my older daughter. And I came downstairs and it was around 7:30. My mom was awake and I said, okay, it's time, we're going. And she was like, what? Because we had literally like moved in that night, like the night before this. And so God knew, like the timeline was pretty incredible. So I let her know that I'm in labor. We're gonna drive down to the birth center. We'll see you later. We'll keep you posted. So we got in the car and it was about a 30-minute drive. It was a Saturday morning. And it's like the divine alignment is incredible because it was a Saturday morning coming from where we were, there was literally almost no one on the road. It was a December day and it could have been a snowstorm. It could have been all the things, but we were so lucky that there was almost no one on the road, zero traffic. We got down to the birth center with ease. And during this time, my contractions definitely started to become more regular. I wouldn't think I was in like full on active labor yet, but they had become more regular in an actual pattern, probably coming every 4 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes. And I had my little AirPods in. I was listening to my Christian hypnobirthing app and those amazing tracks, and they're just like positive affirmations and help mentally prepare you for the labor and birth process. So I have my beautiful birth album here. I'll probably show you some highlights of the moments in birth that have a important part. So we got down to the birth center, and this is what I will say that is amazing about midwifery care if you were going to be in the out of hospital birth, is that there were not a million people around. I got there, we got escorted right in. Jessie and our nurse Shannon were there to welcome us. And the birth center I gave birth in had 3 birth rooms. I wanted the mountain room. That's what I had envisioned for my birth. And at the time, there was no other laboring client there. So they just escort me back to the mountain room. We got set up. And it was amazing because there were 2 lovely women there, my midwife and the nurse. In a hospital, you have to be prepared to see many, many faces, to see multiple different nurses, especially if it's a long labor. You're gonna have the shift change, so you'll have multiple nurses, potentially multiple doctors or midwives, and the continuity of care is not there. I was very lucky in my first birth that because it was fast, I had my midwife, Rachel, with me from the moment I got there until after my birth. But even still, I would lie if I wasn't being honest. I would tell you that I was a little disappointed that by 2 a.m. after my birth of my first daughter, like we just said bye to my midwife, and that was it. And I did not see or hear from her, of course, because this is just how the system works, until my 6-week postpartum visit. And I specifically chose to schedule with my midwife to have that continuity of care. In an out of hospital birth, you're gonna build rapport with your midwife, whether it's a solo practitioner or a group practice like where I was in. I had 1 nurse and 1 midwife during my labor and birth, and then I'll get to that point in the story, but there was 1 shift change where I had a new nurse. But even still, these 2 nurses that I worked with also, one the following day I went and saw at the midwife center for our immediate visit. And then for my 2-week postpartum visit, I saw the other nurse. So it's like I literally had 3 women that I was working with throughout the end of my pregnancy, birth, and postpartum period. And that continuity of care matters so much. I think it's something that some women may focus on more heavily than others. But like experience it and be honest with yourself. If you had that experience in the hospital that you did not find it really sat well with you, the fact that you had so many different people in and out of your room, I encourage you to consider your options because there are options. So anyway, that's a tangent on its own. But we got checked in and I consented to a vaginal exam to check to see where I was in labor. And this was my only cervical exam throughout my whole labor process. And that might be shocking to people because if you're in the hospital setting, it's really common to have multiple cervical exams throughout your labor process, especially right before you're complete, to confirm that you're dilated to 10 centimeters and that you're complete and that you're allowed to start pushing. Okay, so I consented to a vaginal exam. I was about 4.5, 5 centimeters, and I had a bulging bag of water. So that showed us that there was a nice amount of dilation, 5 centimeters, and that my bag of water was right there. So at that point, we got checked in. We set up little twinkle lights. We set up little flameless candles in our room. And it was really, really so lovely to have a space that, yes, it wasn't a home birth, but here's my little twinkle lights. It was not a home birth, but we made the room feel as homey as possible. So at that point, around 8:15 or so, I let my doula know that it was time to come in, and she said, okay, great, I'll be there as soon as possible. So my husband and I were kind of just shooting the shit. We were chatting. They got my husband a nice coffee. They got me some tea. I would stop and breathe through my contractions. They were coming, but it was still like a really lovely period where I was not in intense active labor yet. So that was really nice. So my doula had arrived at 9 a.m. So we had only been there for an hour. And at 9 a.m. she came in. I was starting to have a contraction. And these pictures really crack me up because this picture here in particular is when my water decided to explode. And it was so funny to me the way I was holding my mouth because I was in that baggy sweatshirt and black baggy pants, and no one could see right away that my water had ruptured on its own. And this was a really cool experience for me because I had my amniotic sac ruptured in my first labor, that's AROM, whereas this time around it was a spontaneous breaking, which was a really cool experience. But also I knew that after my water had broken, that labor was going to level up and probably become more intense, and then I was going to be in that like really active stage of labor. So that was around 9. And then here I am just laboring on the side of the bed there. And things had really, really revved up. It was getting intense. At this point, I was kind of kneeling and just swaying at the edge of the bed. And my midwife and nurse could see that things were getting intense. And they knew that I wanted to have a water birth. So my midwife, Jessie, was like, Krista, do you think it's time that we start filling up the tub? And in my mind, I didn't register that this baby could be coming soon. And I was like, no, I want to wait, because I was thinking in my mind that if I got in the tub, it could slow my labor down. You hear stories of women that get into the birth pool or birth tub too early in their labor and then become so relaxed that sometimes contractions can kind of slow down. They can become a little more spread out. And that was not the case for me. I literally, in this picture here, I literally had one more contraction like that, and it was really intense. And then I was like, nope, yeah, it's okay. Start filling up the tub. So at that point, they filled up the tub, and it was time for me to get in. And once again, you do not have a crystal ball. You have no idea how long this labor is going to happen. And one thing I will say about going through this experience, normal, natural, physiologic, whatever you want to call it, it was wild. It was happening so fast that my logical brain, my thinking brain, couldn't really catch up to what was happening in my physical body. So at this point, I had gotten into the water, and this is one of my favorite photos where I was in the water, contractions were coming hard and fast, and I had a moment where after literally a full year of being pregnant, had passed, and it was a really challenging time to conceive a second baby, lose that baby, then become pregnant again right away. And I had time to grieve that second pregnancy, but it was still a lot. So I had literally been pregnant for a full 12 consecutive months, and I knew that this was like the finale. I was about to meet my little rainbow baby that I had waited and prayed so hard for. And this series of photos is pretty incredible because I just like gave it up and surrendered, which I think in birth is so important. You have to surrender. You cannot control your contractions. You cannot control your birth. There are things we can do, of course, but you need to just give it up and surrender and take each contraction as they come, because you're getting closer and closer to meeting your baby. So there was a moment there where I just like had my hands up, where I was surrendering to the process. And, you know, I'm really happy I have these amazing photos to document that. And then things got way more intense. I was in transition at this point. I had only been in the water for a couple minutes. Contractions were coming faster and faster, and they felt back to back to back. And in transition, it is the hardest part of your labor. This is the point where so many women are like, I give up, I'm done, I want to go to the hospital, I want an epidural, I can't do this anymore. A lot of self-doubt comes into play because it is so freaking intense. But the good news is, in most cases, transition is a really relatively short period in your labor, and your practitioners are going to know that baby is close, because once you're at transition, things are moving fast, you're almost complete, and it's almost time to meet your baby. So at this point in my labor, I'd only been in there for, 10-15 minutes, and my midwife, because of the position I was in, my midwife asked if I would kind of change positions and face my husband. So I ended up being in this position here, where my bottom was kind of facing her, and I was leaning on my husband and gripping him for dear life. And this was it, you guys. I was going through a couple of contractions, and I did not know that I was about to meet my baby. This is what's insane about when you have a physiologic birth. There's not someone checking you and saying like, you're complete, you're 10 centimeters dilated, you're allowed to push now. When you're working with a practitioner that trusts natural birth, they see the signs and watch your body and know that you are at that point, and you don't need an approval or a yes, it's time. Your body is just going to naturally know when it's time to bear down and push your baby out. So I experienced something called the fetal ejection reflex, and I swear to you, that is when I finally was like, oh, I'm about to meet my baby, because my body was literally bearing down on its own without me making any conscious effort to assist it. And that was a freaking wild experience to like let your body do its thing. So that was it. I was gripping onto my husband for dear life, and then dun da da da, here comes sweet baby June. She was born into the water and then placed onto my back like a little koala bear. Here she is. As soon as she came out, she was screaming and happy, and she was on my back, and it was the best thing ever, because it was really, really hard. It was really, really painful. I am not gonna lie to you. The transition into my body pushing on its own was the most intense experience that I've ever had. And it was a lot, okay? But it was such a brief period of time that it is 100% worth it. Like, if we were to have more babies, which I hope that we have another, I will choose an unmedicated birth if we're low at risk and all the things, because it's a really intense experience, but then it's over and your oxytocin is exploding to levels that you'll never have again. And it is all freaking worth it. So here's my little chunky baby on my back like a little koala. And it was just the best experience, one of the best experiences of my life. So she was on my back, and just, I couldn't see her yet, but it was so special that my husband got to see and touch her first. And that was just like so joyful for me. And we had our moment, and then I, of course, was gonna hold her, so I had to stand up, and my midwife, Jessie, passed June underneath my legs, handed her to my husband, and then she came to me. And this is my only regret, to be honest, about my birth, is that from there, when they handed her to me, we moved on to the bed, which is here. But I do wish I had just a couple of minutes where I got back and I sat back into the water and just had her on my chest and could really enjoy and kind of come back into my body. I do feel like it was a little rushed from giving birth and then moving to the bed. I understand why that's what happened, but in hindsight, I wish I was able just to pause, hold my baby onto my chest, sit back into the water, and like just reconnect and digest what just had happened. But like I said, nothing is ever gonna go absolutely perfect. That was like my one thing where I wish I could have changed. But then that was it. Like, it was incredible to meet this baby, to welcome her into our family, and it was just the most powerful birth experience that I could have asked for. It was something I worked so hard for and hard to accomplish. I think every birth is absolutely incredible, and every mother is a freaking rock star warrior. But for me personally, with this birth, I really felt like I wanted to prove to myself that I could do this, that I could do it. There's women all over the world that are doing the exact same thing right now. And for me, that was just the experience that I desired. And I'm so beyond grateful that I had the team that allowed me to do that, and that I was able to have the birth that I really wanted. And yeah, I mean, it's just so amazing. The fact that we are in this room where I had the baby, we didn't get moved to another room. We just were able to stay there and just like be in the post-birth bliss. We were just so overjoyed. And I will say, not having an epidural is amazing. The fact that after you give birth, you can just get up and walk. And the same thing, like after you have a birth, whether it's medicated or not, your nurses will escort you to the restroom to make sure that you can empty your bladder, all of that. And when you don't have an epidural, you don't have to worry about your legs not being ready or anything like that. Like, I was ready to use the bathroom and all of the things. And then there she was. My beautiful little chunky monkey, June. And because I carried her for essentially 2 weeks longer than I did my first child, she was almost a full 2 pounds heavier, which I felt when I was pushing. But it was just amazing. And my mom came down with my older daughter to meet the baby. And mind you, this is incredible because we got it at the birth center at 8 a.m. My water broke at 9 a.m. My doula was there. I got into the water a short period of time later, and my daughter was born at 9:43. So it was so fast. Like, within an hour and a half, 2 hours, we had gone through the labor and the birth of my baby, the birth of the placenta, and then we are asking my mom and my older daughter to come down and see us. So just amazing. And shout out to Jess. That's my doula and my birth photographer there. She was wonderful. So after my daughter and my mom came down, they're going to go through checks, make sure the baby's doing well, make sure that you're doing okay, make sure your blood pressure is normalized, make sure your bleeding's under control, and then you get to go home. This is what's amazing about either giving birth in a birth center or having your baby at home, is that people are a little scared that, oh, you're not being monitored or, whatever. You are. You're being observed. They're making sure you're going to get nutritious, dense food to replenish. They're checking your bleeding. They're checking the baby. They're making sure that everything is normal and stable. And you're also going to know if there are any warning signs of when to contact your midwife or your care providers. So it was unbelievable because we had my baby. We got delicious food. We enjoyed it. We enjoyed it with our doula. And I got to shower, get cleaned up. And then I went home, back to my parents' home. And we got home around probably 3 p.m. We were there for probably a total of, 6 hours. And it was so funny because my dad was like, oh my God, I can't believe you are home with a baby. It looks like you just went out for go shopping. Like, it was mind blowing to him to experience and witness his daughter give birth and just come home as if it was like an ordinary day, which I will say, birth is an absolutely incredible miracle that happens daily, all the time. So it is like the most magical, incredible experience, but it can just be like a normal day. So that is what was really interesting and unbelievable about having an out-of-hospital birth, is that you just get to go home, and I got to enjoy my mom's amazing cooking, and my sister got to come to the house and meet my baby that was just a few hours old, and it was really, really nice to be like home with my older daughter, and I really would not change the experience at all. I'm so beyond grateful for my care team and my husband and my doula and myself, that I knew what I wanted and I did what I needed to do to accomplish that birth. They just got home. Pause. Okay, so I encourage you to choose a birth setting and practitioners that resonate with you and your family. Decide really what you want. You have options. And if you don't have options in your community, you can always travel somewhere else to have your baby or have a midwife come to you. So I just encourage you to do your own homework. You don't have to do, just the run-of-the-mill normal birth that is just part of our society here in America. Do what feels right for you and your family. I hope this birth story was helpful to you. Once again, it's changed my life for the better, and I'm so happy that this is the birth that I was able to achieve. And I hope this was helpful. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe if you found this helpful, if you think that a mom that is about to give birth would benefit from it. And please head over to Instagram where you can find me, Birth and Bloom. I'll put my handle right down here. And that's it for today, guys. I hope you have a fantastic day. I know this was a long one, so if you're still watching, thanks so much for watching. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.